Welcome to F4 Talks. With me is Josef Olmert again. Josef is a professor. Josef has worked as a peace negotiator. Josef has been an official in the Israeli government. He comes from a very eminent political family, and few people understand Israeli politics and Israeli defense policy as well as Josef does. Welcome, Josef.
Thank you so much. And the compliment is always a little bit overdue, but it's okay.
Well, you're just too modest.
Because it puts pressure on me,
Well, Josef, to move to a very serious matter that is dominating headlines, and you've read it, I've read it, it's this appeal by Israeli senior officials to Trump to intervene. And what it goes to is the heart of the matter, that there seem to be deep Israeli divisions on Bibi Netanyahu's, or Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and his coalition's policy in Gaza. So what is going on beyond the headlines? Paint us a picture, Josef.
A lot is going on, as you can imagine. First of all, the petition that you refer to is a very significant one, signed by a large number of very eminent, very prominent, former Israeli
officials, yes,
security, intelligence officials, politicians, which represent one of the two bodies of such people that exist in Israel. The other body is, of course, more on the side of Netanyahu's government, and they also have a long list of eminent and prominent people. But, of course, the fact is that this division exists. And that's the main point here.
Yeah.
It exists
very quickly, sorry to interrupt. Is this division along party lines, that the left and the center...
it's a good question. It is along ideological policy lines, not necessarily party lines, because this petition is center-left with a more leftist, dovish flavor. Mm-hmm. And the other guys, the bitchonistim, the security-minded, as they are calling themselves, they are definitely center-right with a much stronger right-wing flavor. So it is not so much about party lines, because not everybody in this petition is belonging to a particular political party, as opposed to the other guys or the more right-wing side that most of them, I believe, would support Likud. But I just assume, by their names and so on and so forth. At any rate, the problem really is that there is a real question being asked in Israel. And by the way, I personally also asked this question. What's the goal? What does the government of Israel want to achieve these days?
I mean, we just know from BBC breaking headlines that it is complete reoccupation of Gaza. That's
I'm coming to that. The question really is, what should Israel do to achieve finally the fulfillment completely of the two main goals which they set to achieve after the 7th of October, the atrocious attack by Hamas, which is the total destruction of Hamas, and the complete release of the hostages.
7th October 2023 now. It's over.
We talk about 20 alive hostages according to the information we get, and about 30 dead ones, bodies. So about 50 altogether. Hopefully they're all alive, but reports that we see are that there are only 20 alive, hopefully. At least this, it should have been 50, all of them, but what can we do in that case? You can argue, and that's of course open for discussion, that 80+% of Hamas is totally destroyed in Gaza, and 50 out of the 250 of the hostages are still not there, not back in Israel. So, totally speaking, the goals of the war were not achieved, not fully achieved. Yeah. Netanyahu is under political pressure about that from his partners in the right wing. And let's start with that. That's where the main problem is, to be honest about it. He's under tremendous pressure from the two factions of the right wing, the one led by Ben-Gvir, the other one led by Smotrich. Altogether, they have 14 seats. And they want to see 100% of the goals achieved. The question is how to do it.
So
And
before you carry on, just tell our viewers and listeners how many seats in the Senate, and tell very quickly in 2 minutes about the proportional representation system and how you have to achieve X figures out of Y to have a government in Israeli parliament.
yes, we have 120 members in the Knesset, not in the Senate, in the Israeli Knesset. It's our parliament, and you need to have 61 for a majority in the Knesset. The representation in the Knesset is by proportional results of the general elections. You have to have at
Proportional
least
representation.
yeah, it's proportional representation, but it is based on a threshold that you have to pass of almost 3%, which are 4 seats in the Knesset to be represented. So the Netanyahu coalition now, with these two guys and their followers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, they have about 68 or 70 members in the Knesset. If they withdraw their support from Netanyahu, he's losing his majority. He's losing his majority, and that is new elections, which he does not want to have. He would like the elections to have on their time, which is over a year from now, in November of 2026. He's not ready, obviously, for new elections because he lost so much popularity after what happened on the 7th of October, even though I should say, according to polls and all kinds of other indications, he regained some of his popularity after the successful campaign against Iran, which he managed to take credit for, and to a large extent, properly so. One should say, properly so. So the problem really is coming back to where we were before, how to end this war. Netanyahu is under tremendous pressures, the pressure from the extreme right wing, go all the way. And therefore, one of the options.
What does go all the way mean? Because we are seeing children.
That's what I'm getting at.
We are seeing mounting international pressure. France has recognized Palestine. Canada has promised to do so. UK said it will unless Israel changes policy by September.
Let me come to that. I'm coming to this. So the point really is that the right wing, the pressure they put on him is, and let's be honest about that, they basically say to him, go all the way to destroy Hamas completely, regardless of the pressures from the outside. And while they don't say it, I should make a point here. While they don't say it, they take into account that if you go for a final major strike against Hamas, you might put in danger the lives of the 20 hostages that are still there alive. That hopefully there still are those 20 alive. And you saw their condition by the videos released by Hamas, how they look emaciated, starved almost to death. Yeah. So that's one pressure. The other pressure is from people like the ones that you mentioned before, those who signed the petition who say, look, we have got to stop it because we might put in danger the lives of the hostages, the remaining alive hostages, and it will take time to achieve the goal of totally destroying Hamas. And in the meantime, you have those pressures from the outside world. And I would add up to this something that I already referred to in my writings before about this situation, the pressures from Trump. Let's be honest about it. Trump does not want the war to go on. So he might put this kind of pressure on Netanyahu now, and I believe that that's what he does. He says to him,
behind the scenes, Donald Trump is pressuring Bibi Netanyahu to put an end to the Gaza war.
Yeah, but how to do it? That's the point. He can say to him, or he does say to him, I believe he does say to him, hey, look, you have wasted so much time. You want to finish it? Go all the way to the final kill, but do it in a big way, or else don't do it and just come to whatever agreement to end it. And Netanyahu is exactly the kind of guy that doesn't like to make these big decisions. On the one hand, he's afraid to lose his majority in the government, and that's apparently his main consideration, I should say. It is his main consideration. On the other hand, he's under pressure from Trump, and on the third hand, if I can use this term, I don't know if it's good to do it from an English perspective, the pressure from friendly governments. Look, you can't say that Germany, for example, which is not exactly saying recognize Palestinian state, but making all kinds of indications, is not a friendly country to Israel these days, at least. You can also not argue that even the current British government under Starmer is as bad as it could be under another Labour government, and so on and so forth. And there are other governments that are standing on the sidelines waiting to see what will happen. So there are lots of pressures here. And what you hear from Israel in the last 24 or 48 hours, that Netanyahu wants to go for the final occupation, which means to destroy Hamas militarily completely, indicates that he wants to gain time with the extreme right wing. And the question really is, does he mean it or not? Here is my answer to that. I asked the question, I'll give you the answer. Right now, it is still old me. He somehow is waiting to some kind of a change in the position of Hamas that will enable the negotiations about the release of hostages to continue. Somehow, maybe the Hamas will be so much terrified by another big threat from Trump, or the Egyptians and the Saudis and even the Qataris will put pressure on them. He is still in the stage where what he says about the reoccupation of Gaza, which means like the total military destruction, as I described, is like old me before I have to do it. That's the way I understand.
Got it.
But
so that's
this is brinkmanship.
A threat, a brinkmanship, exactly.
And brinkmanship is, as we know, is always something that you can use up to a point because it's like a poker game. The question is what the other side thinks about all that. And if the other side, which means Hamas, will say, okay, here are our conditions for an exchange, which Netanyahu is afraid to accept because of the same pressures from the right wing that I explained, will he go for this military option? He can do it only, and I have to make it clear, he will do it only if he gets the green light from Trump. I do not believe, I might be wrong, but I think it will be very difficult for him to go to the full military option without a green light from Trump. So let's wait and see what the Americans are. You know, Trump is changing his opinions, like the joke in Israel is like steak, you know, you turn it around all the time. He changes his opinion every 15 minutes. Who knows?
So let's go back to the divisions. This is a first, as in Israeli former officials are appealing to an American president to restrain their own prime minister. I also hear from friends in Israel that many senior officers in the IDF and senior officials in the Mossad want to put an end to the war in Gaza and focus on Iran because they believe that the threat from Iran is far greater, more existential, and the more urgent and serious one. What do you say about these current divisions? Is this a new era in Israeli politics and society?
A few points here. You made, as usual, great questions, and you know your questions are so good. You'll give me some time to answer.
All your time.
I mean, they are really good questions. Look, first of all, I heard before I came to talk to you that their missile base in Shiraz in Tehran exploded today. So I would leave it at that. Because you mentioned Iran and so on and so forth. There have been a lot of publications in the last couple of weeks about explosions in all kinds of strategic and military sites in Iran that were announced even by the Iranians with all kinds of explanations. So I will leave it at that, you know. Look, there is also a report about more threats from Hezbollah about Israel, in line with what you asked, you know. Now, I don't know exactly who in the IDF and Mossad says what to Netanyahu. That I don't know. I read all kinds of reports. I see the leaks in the press, and I can imagine who these people behind the leaks. But look, there is no question that Netanyahu personally is really mistrusted by a lot of people in the Israeli defense establishment. That's nothing new about it. We know it. And he even says it. He says it and he uses it even to his benefit politically to show to his support. Look, I'm trying to do, but they stop me. So there's no question that he is under pressure from the establishment, and he has always been under pressure from the establishment. His entire political career, by the way, that's interesting, Atul, has been based on the idea that he is the anti-establishment candidate. By the way, something like Trump. When it works. It has worked for him. It has worked for him. So look, the fact that they approached Trump is interesting, but not unique in Israeli history. It hasn't been done in such a way, maybe, but in the past, Israeli elements approached American administrations with all kinds of ways, maybe not in such a blunt public way, but they did. And why they did it, it's very simple, because they know, as I told you already, that Netanyahu needs the green light from Trump, or vice versa, the red light. So that's why they approached Trump, and they did, from their perspective, something which, politically speaking, is logical. What are the implications of it on Israeli public opinion? That's something else. Look, Israelis don't like to feel that they are so dependent on America.
Yeah.
It's not something that plays into the overall sense of self-pride, of Israeli strength and all that, on the one hand. On the other hand, Israelis do like to think that there is a great friend called America, because America is America, So there is, you understand, there is a kind of catch-22.
On the one hand, they like having America as a friend. On the other hand, they don't want to be dependent, and certainly not seen as being dependent.
They don't like the idea that they are dependent to that extent, or so much dependent. It's kind of something that people would like to say, hey, look, we are like allies. But in this alliance, you have big brother and you have you have the smaller brother. And Netanyahu, by the way, has gained political capital by the friendship with Trump, because of what I said, that people like to think that they are friends, that Israel is friendly with the US, or the US is friendly with Israel. I served the Prime Minister, Yitzhak Shamir, way back. And there was a
years ago.
years ago, we were younger at that time. and Shamir, it always was a problem, and Shamir always, and I remember it, always used to say to me in the end of the day, look, in the end of the day, we shall do what we have to do. And he hardly could even accept the idea of accepting American pressures, and making political gain out of them. Netanyahu, on the other end, makes a lot of political capital by his close friendship with Trump, which is basically one in which Trump is the dominant power. There's no question about it. And by the way, Trump makes it very clear to us all that he is the dominant power. Surprisingly enough, right? Surprisingly enough, yeah.
He made it clear to Keir Starmer in Scotland. He made it clear to Ursula von der Leyen. He makes it clear to everyone who comes and visits him, or he meets anywhere in the world.
And you know what? Israelis who support Netanyahu look at it like a benefit. They say, look at Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the best friend of the number one person in the world. So, it's a question of how people look at it and understand it.
Mm-hmm. So, the question still does not go away about divisions in Israeli society. They have deepened, they have widened. The chasms were always there, but now they are growing. And you have the far right, which has said all kinds of stuff, including talked about ethnic cleansing. And this has made a lot of professional people in the defense ministry, in intelligence, in military, very nervous and actually upset, because they see it as diplomatically suicidal.
It is definitely, look, there is a deterioration in the overall international status of Israel. But look, it is again a much deeper problem, because what you talk about here is also the forces of bias against Israel, anti-Semitism, and all kinds of issues that are in the background always when you talk about Israel. Look, Netanyahu made a lot of mistakes. There's no question about it. He also made some good things, or many good things. It's a question of how you look at all this. But it will be a mistake to try and personalize everything on one person, because then we ignore much more.
I'm not personalizing. I'm talking.
I'm not saying that you do it. I'm saying that altogether, that's the sense that one gets. That this is Netanyahu will decide this or decide that. Yeah. Now, about the schism in Israeli society, there's nothing new about that. What's new is that it is being resumed now, as there is a growing sense of frustration with the way the war in Gaza has been going on. It wasn't, by the way, about, say, the situation with Hezbollah. It's taken to be for granted like a great Israeli victory. It hasn't been the case with regard to the question of Iran, which is taken to be a great Israeli victory. And I make the point here because bear in mind, and that's important that our viewers bear in mind, the war is not just the war in Gaza, there is a war in other fronts. And one can argue that by and large, Israel is on top of all that. So when you put it all on the plate, you need to have a big plate here. And in Israel, many people can be against Netanyahu, but in favor of some things that he does. They can be in favor of Netanyahu and against other things. The polls
on Iran, that was very clear. Almost all of Israeli society was.
That's what I'm saying. It's also about Hezbollah.
That you had to hit Iran and of course Hezbollah. So there was national.
And also, by the way, also about the policy with regard to Syria, the defense of the Druze in Syria, and all that. It has been very popular in Israel and taken to be a great success.
So let me ask you a controversial question from your point of view. There are Israeli human rights groups now alleging that the Israeli government, led by Bibi Netanyahu, and in particular supported by far-right gentlemen that you've just mentioned, is conducting genocide. That is a very serious allegation now coming from within, not from outside.
Look, it comes from two organizations that are extreme left-wing, that are against everything that Israel has done about everything. They were against the war in Iran. They were against whatever happened with Hezbollah. There's no genocide. And look, I put a video, not through a Fair Observer, I apologize for this, about Gaza, and it got thousands of viewers. There is no starvation in Gaza. There are starving, but let me tell you something. I need to say to you,
there are images of starving children and dying.
Yeah, well, look, we saw two pictures of starving children that proved to be fake cases, and the New York Times even apologized for this. But even if there is one child who is starving, bad, I would say to you, it's terrible. It should end. It should stop. But the question is, what happens? Who stops the distribution of food and why? The UN. Because the UN wants Hamas to survive the war, and therefore they want them to be the ones in charge of distribution of the food, because that gives them the power. That means Hamas, and then it means the UN role in Gaza through UNRWA and all that. Let's be honest about that. Gaza
you differ with Cindy McCain, who was just alleging that the Israeli government is not allowing distribution of food.
That's not true. I don't know. Cindy McCain, who is the daughter of John McCain?
I think so. John McCain's widow.
So I can differ.
I may be wrong, but I think I heard her.
I don't know who she is exactly. Look, she's terribly wrong about that. She simply doesn't know the facts. She doesn't know the fact. Look, Steve Witkoff was in Gaza and came back and said it's all nonsense. Everybody who really have an open mind and they don't try to look for guilt of Israel will tell you that. I'll tell you beyond that, Atul. Tell you beyond. Gaza is swamped with food. Swamped with food. Swamped. The problem really is distribution, because distribution means control. And that brings it to the basic problem, control, politics.
Yes, very quickly. Cindy McCain has said Israeli troops have fired on crowds that were trying to get food. And she's been all over the news. And she used to be the United Nations World Food Programme Executive Director.
Okay, so that's not.
And she's calling Gaza a humanitarian, could be a humanitarian catastrophe. Like none other. And she's a Republican.
So what do you mean, like none other? You see all these well-fed people talking about the children starving. You see a father who is well-fed saying, my child is dying. Why would this child dying if the father is well-fed? I mean, look, all this propaganda is so. I'll tell you why it is damaging. It is damaging. First of all, it's not true. It's not true. There is no evidence of that. And if she says it may lead, so it may lead or not. What could stop it? What could stop it? Distribution. It all comes back to politics. And that's exactly the problem. And I'm saying to you something very simple. The question is who is going to distribute the supply in Gaza? The ones who will distribute will be in control of Gaza. And
Understood. And the
therefore,
Israelis are very clear that Hamas will not distribute, and the Israelis will distribute the food themselves.
no, the Israelis and the GHF, this
Mhm.
this American foundation, and everybody else wants to distribute the food, but
Mhm.
make
But
control
not
of the
not
distribution.
not Hamas and not the UN.
Not Hamas. The UN can do it if they don't depend only on Hamas, and they do it deliberately. Look, the
I see.
UN is playing a very negative role. They want to keep Hamas there, and they say, by the way, they say it. So
Mhm.
it's not like what I say. They say it. They want
Mhm.
to keep Hamas because if they keep Hamas, it keeps the role of the UN through UNRWA and all the rest of it. Let's be
Mhm.
honest about that. It's all about control of Gaza. And
Got it.
we talk here about a tragic situation because,
Yeah.
as I said to you, and I want to be clear about it. Even if there is one child dying because of it, is so maybe there are cases of starvation. Who knows? I don't. We don't know. But starvation as a phenomenon does not exist in the Gaza Strip. Does not. Period.
Well, okay. There are people who contend that, and but more
And other people
importantly,
contend otherwise. The same people that come from Gaza say this or say that.
okay. So let's talk about my final question because you have to go, and you've been very generous with your time. Uh, Gaza is dividing Israeli society. Unlike Iran, unlike Hezbollah, it is dividing Israeli society, and it is dividing Israeli society at the highest level. I have been very impressed by all the security professionals I have met from Israel. Anybody I've met from your special operations units, they have been top professionals. Anybody I've met from your intelligence agencies have been top professionals. As far as you may disagree with the politics, which you may disagree with what Israel may be as a state, but as professionals, they are top notch. These very professionals now are not happy or have lost faith, many of them, and
Many of them.
they are speaking openly. Now, where does this division lead to?
Look, first of all, many of them do, and as I said before, no
Mm,
others say the opposite. But yes, there is a big division, you profound division, you pinpoint to a real problem.
yeah,
My solution, and the simplest solution and the most logical one, is that there should be, as early as possible, new elections to decide on the future direction of the state of Israel.
mm.
So that will be a good solution, as it should be in a
But
democratic
will it
system.
happen? Will Bibi and the far right allow it? Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and
They,
Bibi
well,
boycott.
that's the problem. Look, the problem really is that he has the majority that would prevent it from happening
Yeah.
because they don't want to go to elections in which they will be swept out of power, or at least so the polls show. But the fact of the matter is that you still have to bear the fuller picture. And while there is this big debate in Israel, bear in mind that there are two sides to the coin. There is also the other side, Hamas, this group of people that is terrible, that is Nazi-like in their methods and whatever. And you don't have a war against yourself. You don't end the war also unilaterally. So there has to be also the other side here. And you may argue that maybe it is the failure of Israel, maybe it has been impossible to force Hamas into complete submission without
I mean, they
totally
are now
destroying them.
popular in the West Bank as well.
Look, before we come to the West Bank, I'll touch on it because you mentioned. Here is the catch-22 that we've had, Israel has had since the beginning of all that. You go for a terrible, total, complete military destruction of Hamas, you've got to have apocalyptic situation of more casualties, more destruction.
As
So
you're
then
seeing.
people, so exactly, so then people criticize you. But if you
Mm,
don't do that, Hamas is there. And if Hamas is there, what did you do? So let's be honest about this. This is not a problem that is created by Israel. It is created by the fact that Hamas is what it is.
mm,
And you talk about peace, and then I'll come to the West Bank. In the question of the West Bank, look, I wrote it for years, and I say to you, and I'll
mm.
say to you, those elements among the settlers who behave the way they do or misbehave, they cause terrible damage, first of all, to themselves and to the state of Israel. They should be restrained in all kinds of ways. by the security forces. There's no question about it.
And
At the same
tried in court, perhaps, and
and
convicted.
they should be stopped in all kinds of ways, legally and on the ground. At the same time, Israel is obliged to prevent the creation of a Hamas-type situation in the West Bank. So again, you see, it's in between these two situations, these two extremes that you have to navigate. And I don't think, that's the way I will end it up, you will, I do not think that Netanyahu is navigating it properly in the case of Gaza, because he seems to be much more on the side of the extreme right wing, because for him it means not just relying on them about Gaza, it's relying on them to prevent the downfall of his government.
Understood. So Bibi Netanyahu has taken the support of the far right, who tend to be inordinately religious, to ensure political survival, and this opportunism is not serving Israel well.
Well, that's a question of opinion. I think that Israel needs to have new elections as soon as possible.
Excellent. All right. On that note, we hope you get your elections, Joseph. And thank you for your time. And we'll have you back. It's always a joy talking to you. A real pleasure, a real honor.
Always the same with me. Take care, my friend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.